Good morning, everyone, and welcome, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Rabbi Ross Levy. I'm the assistant rabbi here at Congregation Kol Ami in West Hollywood, California, and we are so thrilled and honored to be hosting this session focusing on the battle for equality at the Kotel at the Western Wall, and to be joined by Yochi Rappeport. So, a little bit of background. The Women of the Wall is a group of Jewish women from Israel and around the world who strive to achieve the right to wear prayer shawls, talitot, to pray and to read from Torah collectively and out loud at the Western Wall in Jerusalem. The Western Wall is Judaism's most sacred holy site and the principal symbol of Jewish peoplehood and sovereignty. And the Women of the Wall is working to make it a holy site where women can pray freely as well. And the Women of the Wall is comprised of women from all denominations of Judaism: Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, Masorti, Renewal, and Reconstructionist. Speaking a bit from personal experience, during my year in Israel at Hebrew Union College, I was able to attend as sort of I'm not sure, as a chaperone. I'm not sure what I was there in support of the folks, of the Women at the Wall, a couple of times during my time in Israel. And I think oftentimes when we're talking about these larger issues, these social issues, and we use sort of battle and war metaphors, we talk about battles, we talk about fighting, and the title for our session today is Battle, and I think being there and seeing the really oftentimes scary and violent responses to this group, which is simply fighting for equality, to be able to practice and celebrate Judaism in the same way that we all would like to at one of Judaism's most holy sites. It is indeed a battle, and unfortunately can turn physical and violent very easily. And so it was a really intense and a really moving and powerful experience to see how dedicated these folks are to fighting for equality, fighting for an equality that I think many of us, particularly here in the United States, tend to take for granted. So I'm really, really excited to be able to learn from Yochi today. A little bit about Yochi, who is our guest speaker. Yochi Rappeport was born in Tzfat and raised in the Orthodox environment of the old city of her birth. Upon turning 18, Yochi was drafted into the Israel Defense Forces, where she served as a commander in the Nativ military course, teaching Judaism and Zionism to new immigrants and non-Jewish soldiers. Following her military service, Yochi studied political science and Middle Eastern studies at Bar Ilan University, and after graduating, she served as an executive assistant at an Israeli news agency. Yochi joined Women of the Wall in 2016 as Director of Education and Community Outreach. Yochi, with her vast pedagogical and halachic knowledge, dedicated herself to educating and inspiring the Israeli public about Women of the Wall's mission to achieve gender equality and religious pluralism. In 2019, after expanding Women of the Wall's educational activities to more than 3,000 people a year, including 2,000 students, Yochi was appointed executive director of the organization. Yochi's identity as an Orthodox woman and feminist shows that a woman may indeed possess both attributes. Married and the mother of a toddler girl, Yochi strives to make Jerusalem and Israel more tolerant places for her daughter's generation and beyond. Please join me in welcoming Yochi Rappeport.
So thank you, Rabbi. I think you got my old CV because since then my toddler is becoming 5 next month, and I also have a younger daughter who's turning a year old next month too. Yes, so I'll ask our our development director to update my CV when she sends it. Thank God she's not a toddler anymore. So just a little bit more about myself, the personal aspect. So I grew up in Tzfat. I grew up in Safed. in the old city of Tzfat. And I grew up in Bnei Akiva, in the Orthodox, not modern, but not ultra-Orthodox environment. And I went to a high school for girls only. And when I became 15, 16, I started realizing that even though I love God and I love religion and I love everything about it, something in my religious experience is still missing. But I couldn't put the finger on exactly what it is that is missing. Tzfat is a very peripheral city, very closed-minded, meaning I didn't have a lot of options out there to start researching what is it that I'm looking for. I knew I did not want to be ultra-Orthodox, and I knew that I did not want to be secular. But in Tzfat, in my life, there wasn't anything in between. So I suffered. And you know how sometimes you're cooking and you're looking for a very specific spice. You're looking for something to make your stew tasty, better. You're looking for the right flavor. And that's exactly what I was doing. As someone who doesn't really know how to cook, I didn't really know, I still don't know what spices are out there or what spices do. Besides, cumin or salt, that's basically it for me. And I was searching for the spice that would help my religious experience, and I was unsuccessful. And then when I was 18, I joined the army, I joined the IDF, and then only in the army I was exposed to the larger Israeli society and to what we call the Jerusalemites, the young female Jerusalem religious community who showed me that there are many ways for Judaism, and that as a woman, I can be present in my religious life, that feminism and Judaism can actually go well together, that it works, and it works well. And then it clicked. Then I realized that what was missing in my life, my religious life, was so basic. It was the salt. It was me being present in my Judaism, going to synagogue and not just sitting in the back or kissing the Torah scroll with my pinky. I can actually read from it. I can actually be called up for an aliyah. I can be up there. I'm not just in the back whispering the words. I'm there. People care if I come or not. They count me. Today, I still consider myself Orthodox. I consider myself modern Orthodox, meaning I still live within the boundaries of the Jewish law, the halakha. And I do believe that even within the Jewish law, there is space for women. There is a place for me to be a part in my religious experience, in my Judaism. And Women of the Wall, the organization that we're going to talk about a little bit, showed me my way back home towards Judaism that makes me feel wanted. That says if you want to, you're welcome. You can practice and you can be equal. So Rabbi Levi is going to share with you a short video clip of Women of the Wall, and then we're going to discuss a little bit about Women of the Wall, our achievements, history, but more than that, what our larger impact is and what the situation in Israel is today. So thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. And as a quick note, I typed it in the chat, but in case folks didn't see it, if you have questions for Yochi, feel free to write them down or write them in the chat. I'll collect them, and we'll have a lot of time for Q&A after.
Put on your face, know your place. Shut up and smile, I could do that. 'Cause no one knows me, no one ever will. If I don't say something, take that dry blue pill. They may see a monster, they may run away.
So the main question that's going to follow this presentation is who owns the Western Wall? And by trying to answer the question, who owns the Western Wall, we're actually going to answer a more complicated question, which is who owns Judaism here in Israel? And before we talk about women of the wall, I want to take a moment and talk about the Kotel, the Western Wall, and to ask why, what's so unique about the Kotel? And when I think about Jews 2,000 years ago, after the destruction of the Second Temple, when Jews were scattered and spread throughout the diaspora, and they were sitting on the rivers of Babylon and mourning Zion, and what kept them together was their hope that one day they will return back home to Judea, Israel of today, and their dream once again to be able to pray freely at the Western Wall, the only remnant that survived after the destruction of the Second Temple. Their hope, desire, their dream, people, 2,000 years of Jews all over praying to return to the Kotel because nothing else survived, nothing else was there. That's what turned the Western Wall into a holy site, meaning it was never God, it was us, the people, Reform, conservative, Reconstructionist, secular, Orthodox, men and women. We all turned the Western Wall into a holy site. And women today, still in 2022, have the same simple dream: to be able to pray freely, according to our tradition, at the Western Wall, the place that we too turned into a holy site with a Torah scroll. Now, Women of the Wall, as Rabbi Levi said before, is a very unique group of women from all denominations. We were able to break the barriers between us women, Orthodox women, Reform, conservative, Reconstructionist, secular, Masorati, Reconstructionist, liberal. We all gathered together, and men as well, by the way. About 10% of the people who join us at the wall are men every month. We gather together once a month, the beginning of the Hebrew month, Rosh Chodesh, at the women's section of the Western Wall. We gather and we pray. We do what everyone else does, pray and demand that women too will be able to pray freely according to our tradition. Praying out loud with our prayer shawls, our talitot, tefillin, and our main struggle until today that still remains is the Torah scroll. Now, just the absurd of this struggle, the fact that Israel was established for one reason, for the purpose of Jews not having to hide their Judaism anymore. After 2,000 years of Jews having to go down to the basement to sing the Manishtanah, to remember that it's Passover, lighting Shabbat candles without having the neighbors seeing what's going out there. And the fact that in Israel today, we still have to fight, a group of Jewish religious women, we have to fight for the very basic Jewish thing, to be able to pray. Pray as liberal-minded Jews at the holiest site for the Jewish people. And it hurts so much to combine the words struggle with tefillah. We fight for the Torah scroll. It's outrageous. Israel was not established for that. Israel promised freedom of religion, and unfortunately, we have freedom of religion for the Orthodox-minded Jews. Anyone who thinks differently, no freedom of religion. To the left are the paratroopers who fought in 1967, and a large group of them joined the Women of the Wall struggle, saying, you are the modern liberators of the Western Wall. Because if in 1967, a group of men with helmets liberated the wall from the Jordanians, today, a group of women with prayer shawls and a Torah scroll are liberating the Western Wall again. And now the question is, the question we asked in the beginning, who are we liberating the wall from? Who owns the Western Wall? And the answer, I'm afraid to say, is very simple. Because right after the government of Israel returned Temple Mount to the Jordanians in 1967, they handed over the keys to the Western Wall, the Kotel, to a small zealot Jewish group from ourselves, among the Israeli society, the chief rabbinate, an ultra-Orthodox institute that control every religious aspect here in Israel. From 1967 until today, who owns the Western Wall? The chief rabbinate does. They appoint the rabbi of the Western Wall, and he turned the Western Wall into the Israeli Vatican, literally a country inside a country. The Israeli police cannot take action, only the Kotel security. The Kotel rabbi, like the Pope, is appointed for life, and that rabbi has the ability to conduct new laws. And the law that he conducted in 1988, when he saw that a group of women are coming to the Western Wall month after month and challenging the way that women prayed until then, says that one may not lead a religious ceremony that contradicts local custom and hurts the feeling of others. And he said, look, everything that women of the wall do is according to the Orthodox halakha. No argument there. But there is something in Judaism that's called tradition. And the custom is that, okay, women can pray with the talit and tefillin, but most women did not take it upon themselves. So the custom is that women just don't pray that way. It's against my custom, my tradition. He turned the Western Wall into an ultra-Orthodox synagogue, and he says, in my synagogue, women have to pray silently. And I just met a group that of young Americans that went to the Western Wall on Friday night, and I asked them, how was it? And the men described it as such an emotional experience where they prayed and they danced and they had a wonderful Kabbalat Shabbat with soldiers who were there. And then the women kind of nodded. And then one of them came up to me and said, you know, it kind of hurt me that in order to be a part of this ceremony, I had to stand on a plastic chair and see my male friends performing the Kabbalat Shabbat. I couldn't be a part. So it was happy, but I still felt something was wrong. So when women of the wall call, we want to pray together, collectively, out loud. And the rabbi says, no, women, silently, because men cannot hear you singing. A woman's voice, according to him, is sexual. So instead of men just simply not listening, women have to be quiet. This law was in place until 2013. Until 2013, it was illegal for women to have their voices heard at the holy site, to wrap the talit, to pray with the tefillin, to try and read from the Torah scroll. If you violated this law, you can go to jail for 6 months or pay a $3,000 fine. Think about it, a law in Israel that says that as a woman, you can go to jail if you dare to wrap a Jewish item at the Jewish holy site. And indeed, between the years of 2010 to 2013, over 50 women were arrested at the Western Wall. Now, I told you the Israeli police does not act at the Western Wall. One exception, if they need to accompany a guard and arrest someone. The reason to arrest women of the wall, of course, was not wearing a talit, because that's not a good enough reason, right? The official reason was that we violate the peace at the Western Wall. We're disturbing the peace at the place. We pray beautifully, and surrounding us are a gung of young girls, young kids, throwing things at us. They're teachers who send them there. They're specially bussed in to demonstrate against our service. And we pray. I literally give them the other cheek when they slap me on the first one, because I don't want to be shoved into that violence. And yet they chose to arrest women of the wall for praying in a different way. They basically accused us for the violence that was directed towards us. And then in 2013, after many women were arrested, the district court finally ruled that there's no reason to arrest women of the wall. But not only is there no reason to arrest us, said the judge, his name was Moshe Sobel, he's religious. He said, the rabbi of the Kotel, he always talks about local custom. Well, the beautiful thing about a custom, about tradition, is that it can change and develop. And women of the wall have been coming to the Western Wall back then for 25 years. We brought a new tradition to the Western Wall, the pluralistic tradition, the liberal-minded way, one that says that women too are able to pray according to their tradition. And legally, we won. Legally today, we can pray out loud. Yes, a lot of violence, a lot of young girls who come and yell and scream, but we can wear our talit and tefillin. No one takes it at the entrance of the kotel like they used to. Technically, we can even read from the Torah, our fourth T, our fourth gold. Legally, we can read from the Torah. The issue is that the rabbi of the Western Wall put up a new law, a new regulation, and this regulation says that no one, men or women, can enter the Western Wall with a Torah scroll. Now he said, look, it's not against women, of course. Men can't bring one in as well. And you know what, he said, you don't need to. Because at the Western Wall, I have 120 Torah scrolls that anyone can use anytime they want. Why bring one from outside? That way you'll be able to steal one of mine. Okay, so it's not against women. But where are all of those 120 Torah scrolls? At the men's section, of course. And women have no access to them. Because when the rabbi says, everyone, public, he means men. Women are not part of the public. So we have no access to those Torah scrolls that he has, and we can't bring one in from outside. So what's our third option? We have to smuggle it in. Every time we come to the Western Wall, we have to try, because it's not easy, and smuggle in a Torah scroll. Now let me tell you, it's not easy. Because when we come, our bags don't go through a regular security check. It doesn't go through the machine. We go through very thorough body search. Our bags go, they check it manually one by one. They open up. They took out a tampon last month, just looked at it as if it's a bomb. And it's very clear that they're not looking for weapons, that they don't care if anyone is able to bring in a knife or a gun and God forbid use it against us. They are looking for a Torah scroll. And one of the most embarrassing moments that I had at the Kotel was walking in there 5.5 years ago. It was February, freezing cold. And here we are, one by one, open up your coats, lift up your sweaters. And then they get to me and I lift up my sweater because I have no choice. And they see something, they see like a huge bump there. I was pregnant and they looked at me and they asked me, Yochi, what's in there? And I was so embarrassed. I didn't even know what to answer. And I said, well, obviously I'm pregnant. You saw me last month and you saw me the month before. It's my daughter. And they took me aside. They had like a small dressing room, so-called, and they brought a female security guard who started touching me all over to see, is it my baby in there or is it a Torah scroll? Now, we all know that it can't be a Torah scroll. They know it too. But they are here to say, you are not welcome here. We're going to embarrass you. We're going to stand in line for so long because your way of Judaism doesn't belong at our Kotel. And once we are able to smuggle it in to the women's section and read from it, you know what happens? Nothing. A group of women reading Torah, having a lovely service. When we have a Torah scroll, our group is so happy, so joyful. The sky doesn't fall, no earthquakes, no tsunami, nothing. A group of women reading Torah and going to work afterwards. But for them, it's a disappointment. They were able to read Torah. So that's our main struggle until today, to be able to read Torah at the Western Wall. In 2013, while women were arrested at the wall, North American Jews have joined our struggle because we might be fighting, our struggle might take place at the Western Wall, but the impact is so much bigger than that. And one of the issues that we are addressing is bridging the gap between Israel and world Jewry. The fact that the majority of Jews all over the world are not Orthodox. They're more liberal-minded. And they also want a place to be recognized at the Western Wall. So they joined our struggle, and they pressured Prime Minister back then, Netanyahu, to find a solution for women of the wall. And the solution is so simple. I don't know when you were at the Kotel last, and when you come next, please book your trip around Rosh Chodesh, contact me. I'll be happy to accompany you at the Western Wall. So this is the Western Wall. As you can see, 2/3 are the men's section. 1/3 is the women's section. Not by coincidence, by the way, in case you were mistaken. And you see the bridge over there? That's the bridge that to the right, that's the bridge that leads up to Temple Mount. To the right of that bridge, underneath it, is what we call Robinson's Arch, the egalitarian section, the family Kotel. This plaza that you see in the picture it's a plaza that was built thanks to Women of the Wall struggle. It was built in 2013, illegally, by the way, overnight, by who was the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs back then, and today is Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. And Naftali Bennett built this plaza that we call a sun deck because it really looks like a sun deck. He built it as a consultation prize for the reform movement. Here you are. You want a place to pray together, men and women. You want a place to celebrate your daughter or granddaughter's bat mitzvah. Okay, here you have a plaza. Supreme Court did not like this solution, and we were offered in 2013 a compromise. It took 3 years of negotiations with Women of the Wall, reform conservative movements in Israel and abroad, the ultra-Orthodox Knesset members here in Israel. And you know what? Even the Kotel rabbi was a part of these negotiations. The person who led it was Natan Sharansky, who was the head of the Jewish Agency. And after 3 years of negotiations, the government finally voted an historical vote about the Kotel agreement. And the Kotel agreement is very simple. You already have a plaza. We are not touching this existing plaza. If people want to pray separately, this is where they go. The Kotel agreement says to renovate this plaza, that it would actually touch the Western Wall stones. It would be accessible because today, handicaps, wheelchairs, strollers, older people, it's impossible to get down there. Government funded, and most importantly, Women of the Wall and not the Kotel rabbi, we run the place. A joint committee of Women of the Wall, Reform Conservative Movement, and the Jewish Agency. So simple. This allows another option for Jews all over the world to pray. If you don't want to pray separately, this is where you go. To celebrate a nice bat mitzvah, we want an honorable, respectable place to pray at. Unfortunately, what happened is that the ultra-Orthodox street, the public, the people, understood that if we are winning the Western Wall, if we are winning the symbol of the Jewish people, they are losing their monopoly over religion. And they can't afford that. Their monopoly equals power, equals jobs, equals everything. And they won't allow that because they don't care what we do at home. But once the government acknowledges our way of Judaism, the liberal-minded way, the pluralistic way, that's dangerous for them. Because I see the word option as a blessed word, and they see it as danger, as a monster. Because option means that people can choose, and they might choose our way. Groups, secular groups, schools, gap years, diplomatics who are visiting Israel and are visiting the Kotel because they have to, will have the option to visit the Kotel, that men are not separated from women. And they don't want that. They want the monopoly for themselves. They demonstrated and pressured the ultra-Orthodox parties. They pressured Prime Minister Netanyahu, who canceled the Kotel agreement because he preferred his power over Jews all over the world. So what we really want is very simple, to read Torah at the women's section. But we understand that we can't fight forever, and that this solution is good for everyone, for Shlom Bayit, to maintain the peace at the Western Wall. I know that there are a lot of ultra-Orthodox women who don't want me at the women's section. They don't want their daughters to see a different way of praying. We are willing to compromise only and if the Kotel agreement will be implemented the way we deserve. And if I may just say one last sentence before I open it up for you, is that Women of the Wall was established 33 years ago. I was born exactly a year after the organization was established. I'm 32 today. And when you ask Anat Hoffman, who's our chairwoman today, and she established Women of the Wall, if you ask her why she did it, she'll say, for my daughter, for her to have a bat mitzvah at the Western Wall. Anat is already a grandmother. Her daughter never had her bat mitzvah at the Western Wall. Maybe her granddaughter will. But if you ask me why I'm dedicating my life for this struggle, it's because I have two young daughters. And what I really want, my dream, is for them to walk into the Western Wall, and that it would be natural that there are choices there. That as young girls, they can just read Torah at their bat mitzvah. That I'm standing there and their father is standing on the other side. Because that's the way we are going to choose for their ceremony. And my dream is that just the fact to normalize the image of women being present in their Jewish experience. Today we had a tefillin booth where we offered women to put on tefillin like Chabad do for men. And so many men, especially men, came up to us, and it was just, they got so angry of the fact that we dare to offer women something that they don't believe in, which is very simple. You don't have to agree. But the fact remains that as women, we are entitled to our Judaism. We are the owners of our Judaism as well. So that's Women of the Wall in a nutshell. And more importantly, I want to hear you.
Thank you so much, Yochi. What a powerful, powerful presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your experiences, and for putting it all into context, giving us a little bit of the background. And something that I was thinking about as you were concluding there was, these people who get so angry at these options, and it makes me think that people who are sort of angry that you have the options maybe aren't the most confident that when you have the options that you'll opt into theirs. And it to me, it comes from a place of insecurity and fear more than anything. And so now we want to open it up to your questions. If anyone has any questions for Yochi, Either use the raise hand function here on Zoom, or feel free to just manually raise your hand. I can monitor everyone. So Samara, if you'd like to begin.
I'm curious about whether you think this is really directed specifically toward women, or whether it's more about the Orthodox trying to control who is deemed Jewish and what it means to be Jewish. One thing I experienced during my Aliyah process is that my father is Jewish and not my mother. So it was a little hurtful to me that they didn't completely consider me Jewish. I did have to go through some extra hoops and get some extra letters from rabbis who knew me growing up. And there's been studies recently that mitochondrial DNA may pass through the father as well as the mother. So I'm kind of wondering about whether Women of the Wall will take on, I kind of understand how you want to focus your strength on the issue of women being allowed to express their Judaism at the Western Wall, but do you see this in a larger context of what does it mean to be Jewish?
For sure. And I'm sorry that that's your first experience with Israel. So as I said, the impact is not just the wall. The impact is larger. And one of the impacts is the monopoly over religion that the chief rabbinate has here in Israel. And we focus at our struggle at the wall, but we are part of a larger struggle to break the monopoly and to allow all streams and all ways of celebrating Judaism, also the secular way, to be equal here, to be well represented and funded also in the same way. As I don't know if you all know, but the chief rabbinate, they hold a monopoly over religion, and there's only one way for everything according to them. And because of state and religion combined together here, so it just means that we don't have civil marriage, for instance. You can only marry within the Rabbanut, which is the Orthodox way. What?
They actually told me that even after I get my full citizenship, because my mother is not Jewish, I would not be able to marry a Jewish man. It would not be recognized by Israel, in Israel. I'd have to do it in the United States.
So anyway, you don't want to marry within the chief rabbinate. The gay community cannot marry here. I will say I broke the law twice in my life. One is when I did not marry within the chief rabbinate because it's illegal to marry outside of the Rabbanut. And the second one was, of course, when I smuggled in a Torah to the Kotel. Now, okay, let's say we're able to go abroad and marry there. Cyprus, by the way, for Israelis is the second most common place to marry at. Afterwards is Prague, all of those cheap places. Divorce. There's only one way to divorce, the chief rabbinate. Even if you did not get married through the chief rabbinate, you can only divorce through them. And in Judaism, the person that allows you to divorce is the husband. And if you go to the chief rabbinate and you want a divorce, they listen to the husband. They don't listen to the wife as well. And oftentimes, and until the husband doesn't say, yes, I'll divorce her, women can be captured. And we have so many women here in Israel captured in their own marriage that they want nothing to do with. And you hear evidence of women talking about their husband being sexually abusive and just being a bad person. He can even sit in jail. But if he doesn't give the approval, she's considered married. Only one way to convert, which is, of course, the Orthodox way. Only one way for restaurants to get a kosher certificate. So with this new government, we are starting to see minor changes, baby steps. They were working on conversion, but the state of Israel still doesn't acknowledge the reform or conservative way of converting here in Israel. If you come up from abroad with a reform conversion, they'll accept it. But then, of course, as you said, if you want to marry, that's impossible. So yes, we're trying to break this monopoly. And what we're saying is that when we break it at the Kotel, the symbol of the Jewish people, it would be much easier with the rest because it's going to be a public, pluralistic place. And there's going to be more than one way to see that Judaism is not only Orthodox. And I'm saying it as an Orthodox Jew. I'm not Reform, I'm not conservative, but I don't understand how Israel, the state of all Jewish people, basically discriminates against so many Jews. And what annoys me so much is that the organizations who fight against this monopoly are religious organizations. You barely hear the secular voice. For them, it's comfortable that we fight their fights, but they have to wake up because they suffer from it as well.
Wow. When's your next event? I'm joining you.
Perfect. So I'm going to send you the next dates. It's May 31st. That's Rosh Chodesh
That's the
Sivan.
date I make Aliyah.
Oh, so I'll send you guys the next dates. I'm also sending you a link to the Women of the Wall Talitot. We have beautiful Talitot that have our motto on it. And our motto is, let me hear your voice, because your voice is melodic and your face is pretty. As I said in the beginning, that the reason that they don't want to hear women singing is because our voice is sexual. And unfortunately, Rav Shmuel, a sage in the Talmud, took the phrase, Hashmi'ini et kolech, let me hear your voice, and said, Kol be'isha irva, a woman's voice is sexual. So he took such a beautiful phrase from King Solomon the Wise and turned it into a phrase that just discriminates against women, which is the second battle that we're fighting, which is discrimination against women in the public sphere. The reason is we hurt the feelings of others by performing, by being in public panels or on billboards. We hurt their feelings, so they physically mark us off or don't invite us to participate. So please join us.
Anyone else have some questions for Yochi? Excuse me. While people are thinking about a question, I actually had a question for you. I was wondering if you could speak, and I appreciated you including the conversation about the egalitarian section, the sun deck, I believe it, as you referred to it. Also known as Robinson's Arch, which is sort of the archaeological area near there. I was wondering if you could speak to the religious diversity within Neshot HaKotel in the sense of, the difference between the conversations about being able to bring a Torah into the women's section versus bringing a Torah into what we refer to as the egalitarian section, or a section where men and women pray together, and about how maybe different voices within the Neshot HaKotel have different preferences when it comes to prayer or tefillah.
So I'm Orthodox. Anat, who's our chair, the founder of Women of the Wall, she's Reform. We have board members from all streams of Judaism. And when we have a debate, and we have many debates, we try to listen more to the Orthodox side, so that everyone feels comfortable in our service. Our service is Orthodox. We have one Siddur. We don't have 3 prayer books that everyone prays according to their way. But when we were offered the compromise back in 2013, before the government voted, before they canceled, before we got into this mess, there was a group, mainly Orthodox, that supported Women of the Wall that said no. Once you agree to leave the women's section, we want nothing to do with Women of the Wall, because there's no way that women won't be able to pray freely at the women's section. We don't want the egalitarian section. It's not going to be separated. There's no mechitza, no divider there, and they're right. And we always agreed with them. but we also understand that in life, you can't compromise is something that's good. If it's a good compromise, if it's something that is well deserved, so we wanted to take it. We saw it as something that would really benefit Jews all over the world. Unfortunately, they were right, that group of women. We couldn't trust the government. The government proved that they care more about their power than anything else. Even within this current government, they said when they negotiated the government, they always talked about the Kotel agreement being something that they all agree on, that they care about, that they'll implement it. And yet today we see that nothing's happening because they want to leave the door open for the ultra-Orthodox to join now or in the future. They're afraid. Now what Naftali Bennett is saying behind the scenes is, wait until Lapid becomes prime minister. Let him deal with this mess. And I see this as something that the person to bring the Kotel agreement will really solve such a huge issue for world Jewry, for Jews all over the world who want to feel connected to Israel. But I can't talk for you, but I hear more and more, especially from young groups, that tell me I don't feel connected. You're different than we are. You don't accept our way of Judaism. And they're right. They're right. Israel more and more is leaning to the right, to the extreme way of Judaism. And we have to solve it now in order to allow everyone to feel connected to their home away from home. Israel doesn't belong to the Israelis. It belongs to everyone. And if you want, Rabbi, we can share the second video that I shared with you before. And this happened exactly a year ago, what your rabbi is going to share with you now.
Sure. I see that Robert had a question. Do we want to ask a question?
I put some chats, my feelings in the chat, but I think it's a struggle between rabbinical authority and the Israeli government. And in Israel, most of the people are not ultra-Orthodox. But Yochi, you explained that it's more of a world opinion. And I think the only answer is negotiation.
You're right, and we opened the door for negotiations. We said we're willing to talk with anyone about everything. And unfortunately, no one picked up. We're in contact with the president, with Yair Lapid, who is maybe at some point will replace Naftali Bennett and be able to serve as prime minister for 2 years. We're in touch with so many politicians that they all want this to go through. And yet no one's able to pick up the ball and just implement this very simple solution. And you're right, it is a struggle between rabbis and politicians. Unfortunately, everything in Israel is political. And it's sad, especially because I love religion so much. I don't like to see what has become from religion.
Thank you for that. I'll go ahead and we'll play this video right now.
Hi, I'm Tammy Gottlieb, Vice Chair of Women of the Wall. I've been coming to the Western Wall to pray with Women of the Wall for almost 13 years. I cry there very few times. Most of the time, I don't let the evil get to me. But on Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, it was just too difficult. A bunch of incited boys, without an ounce of respect, grabbed a suitcase full of our prayer books and tore them to shreds. They stepped on the pages and on my hands. They tore the pages and threw them in my face because of their religious radicalism. I saved what I could, and with a broken suitcase in my arms, I went into the women's section. Once there, surrounded by my friends, I cried. The powerful prayer service we had after this horrible event proved that what we were doing is so important. All the horrible feelings disappeared when I caught a glimpse of one of the young girls that came to pray with us. Especially now, I ask you to join Women of the Wall, stand by our side, and be part of our struggle. Support us.
So unfortunately in Israel, it's called progress by catastrophe. And I'm afraid that we'll get the Kotel agreement, but I don't want it to happen after someone is injured. And unfortunately, with the violence that we see every month, I'm afraid that that's where it's headed to. Yes, Cheryl.
So whatever happened to not desecrating God's name? I don't understand rip up prayer books, knowing that even though they don't agree with those particular prayer books, God's name is in them.
Are you Reform?
Yes, I am, but I have at various times, I've been to Orthodox synagogues, and I am involved with the Chabad community here also.
So you might be able to be saved, but as long as you consider yourself Reform, you're not Jewish. And they look at our prayer book, and even though God's name is God's name, and our prayer book has the same words that they have in their prayer book, they look at our prayer book and they say, this is not Jewish. They see it as a mission. They see it as a mitzvah to protest against us. And unfortunately, that young boy who tore the Sidurim is the one who spat at me last month and told me, I hate you. I do this because I hate you. Why does he hate me? What did I do? I promise you, I'm a nice person. I can be intimidated at times, but why does he hate me? He doesn't even know me. I didn't do anything to him, but he hates me because I'm different. And he's brought up, he's educated that different, meaning Reform, equals Satan. It doesn't matter that I'm modern Orthodox. It doesn't matter that Tommy is conservative. It doesn't matter that you Reform that is involved with Chabad. As long as you are not him and what he believes in, the way he worships God, you're wrong. And he needs to protest against you. He needs to destroy you because we are destroying Judaism. And they see themselves as, we're the reason that Messiah isn't coming. So of course they have to stop us. And they're brought there by their teachers. It doesn't come from nowhere.
I lived in Israel from 1979 through 1984. And the first 2 of those years, I lived at Kibbutz Yehel, which was the first kibbutz of the Reform movement.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a good friend who was converting to Judaism. And she was converting through the Orthodox route because that's the only way you could do it in Israel. However, she was going to be moving back to the Reform kibbutz. And they refused to complete her conversion because she was going back to the Reform kibbutz, where there were others in her class, her conversion class, who were going out into the world acknowledging their plan to be secular. That was fine.
Yes.
Because they were not going to be actively speaking about God in non-Orthodox ways.
Right.
And she
So
was going
secular is fine.
place. She is going
Right.
to be worshiping God in non-Orthodox ways, and therefore that was wrong, and they could not allow that. She had to come back to the States to finish her conversion.
Yes, it's sad. It's sad to hear about it. And you know, they don't care about secular Jews, because secular Jews who are uneducated in the Jewish world in halakha, they don't know any better. Whatever you tell them, they have to, they'll accept, they'll say amen to that. But if you're Reformed, you know, you're brought up with the knowledge, so they suspect you. As long as they see me as someone who's, you know, ignorant in the Jewish world, they'll love me. But once they talk to me and they understand, they hate us so much because we bring answers with us. They don't want answers. They want us to ask them, is it okay? And they'll say yes or no. And the fact that someone can go back to a Reformed place and, you know, absorb Shabbat, but in her own way is not okay. But someone who goes to Tel Aviv and doesn't absorb Shabbat at all is fine, even good, is just not, it's crazy. And one of Women of the Wall's missions is to educate groups. We meet over 200 groups in Israel and abroad, groups that come here or that we travel there, to educate them not only about Women of the Wall and our mission. We just developed a new curriculum that talks about women in Judaism and different ways for Judaism. We're looking now into a grant to develop a new curriculum to talk about the three streams and everything that it brings with it, that people just know you can choose. And it's fine if you choose the ultra-Orthodox way, it's fine, but do it out of choice and not out of ignorance.
As mentioned before, I think most Jews in Israel are not Orthodox, and most Jews in the world are not. So it seems as if the government is succumbing to the ultra-Orthodox rabbinical authority in Israel and not considering the majority of the people.
True, it's a matter of power. But Robert, I also have to say that even the secular Jews in Israel were not Orthodox. And I say it because I was brought up in such a city. The Judaism that we are educated over is Orthodox. Meaning, if you want to teach a class about bar mitzvah, you go into a synagogue that's separated with a divider in the middle. They only see the Orthodox way. They don't know that there are other ways of celebrating Judaism. But you are right. I completely agree with you about the power control issue.
And
So,
also,
taking a look at the time, I think I want to be mindful of everyone's time, and especially of Yochi's time at getting it a little bit later into the evening in Israel. But I just want to, I think I speak for everyone in saying how much I appreciate you spending this time with us, sharing your story, sharing the really important work that you're doing. And I want to thank you on behalf of Congregation Kol Ami and everyone that was here, both for spending your time with us this Sunday and really informing us and inspiring us. And also thank you for the sacred work that you're doing. As you mentioned, it's work not just on behalf of the folks at the Kotel every Rosh Chodesh or in Jerusalem, but it's work on behalf of Israeli Jewry. It's about opening up options for those who see themselves as secular or whatever type of Jew that they are, and it's work on behalf of world Jewry and bridging that gap between Israel and Jews in the rest of the world. So thank you so much, Yochi.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was great to Zoom meet you all. And when you're in Israel, you have my email, so please contact me. I would love to meet you.
Well, thank you again, and wishing everyone a good day.
Good week, too.
Shavua Tov.